So today, we're going to be continuing in our Matthew series, this parable of the wedding feast. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to read this entire parable, start to finish, verses 1 to 14. And again, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son, and sent his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. Again, he sent other servants, saying, 'Tell those who are invited, see, I've prepared my dinner. My oxen and fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his farm, another to his business. While the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. The king was angry, and he sent his servants and destroyed those murderers and burned their cities. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find.' And those servants went out into the roads and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there a man who had no wedding garment. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" Let me just pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you, Jesus, for even just speaking to us in these parables. Thank you for the message that you have just filled with the gospel. Just speak through me and touch your people and help them to be changed to be more like you. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, this is an intense parable, right? Let's just get that out there right away. And just shed a little context of where we are right now. From Matthew 21, verses 23, all the way where we are today, Matthew chapter 22, and then even to chapter 23, this is all taking place as one continuous event. Right? So Jesus is teaching in the same location, on the same day, to the same people. So what you heard for a month ago, today, and for the next month, it's all part of the same event. And that's important because here in our passage, we see the third of three parables. Three parables of which Jesus seems to be uniquely having the exact same point. It's like he's saying, do you see those people over there? Right? Like the Pharisees, these people you hold so highly righteous. Do you see the way they dress, the way they act, the way they study? The way they display their works? They are on their way to destruction. Their self-righteousness is carrying them to hell. Jesus says in Matthew 5, "Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." We have to remember this context because when Jesus Christ, the one through whom all things were created, right? The one who Paul says holds all things together. When he repeats the same thing, that self-righteousness can't save you 3 times in a row, we have to pay attention. Jesus, over the course of his ministry, he seems to be coming back to this point over and over again. He takes it so seriously. So today we're going to as well. His main point, his main thrust of this parable is that the good news of Jesus is for all those who know themselves to be unworthy. You can ignore it. You can reject it, but you can't earn it. I'll say that again. The good news of Jesus, the gospel, it's for all those who know themselves to be unworthy. And you can ignore it, you can reject it, but you can never earn it. And really the reason he's saying all this is because that's our heart. That God would give you and me this perfect, free, good, priceless gift. And we would still ignore it, we would still reject it, and for some reason we would try to earn it on our own anyway. And maybe you know this, but I really need you to understand that you can have all the outward characteristics of a Christian. You can serve on the worship team, you can greet, you can clean up every Sunday. You can pray in public with all zeal and passion and give so generously to your church that you have to give up things you need. You can do all that, and you can still be no different than a Pharisee. If your heart has not rested in the finished work of Christ, if you're still clinging to your own good deeds and works, if there's anything you think you can bring to the foot of the cross, you're no different than a Pharisee. If all we have is an outward appearance of religion, then look inwardly and all you're going to see is a frail, broken, and fruitless heart. That's what this parable is about. And it begins with an invite to a wedding feast. Throughout the course of this story, we're going to see three different types of responses to this invite: the indifferent, the unworthy, and the unchanged. With these three responses, these 3 points, we're going to actually break this whole parable down: the indifferent, the unworthy, and the unchanged, and we're going to understand its real significant and eternal meaning. Jesus starts this parable by comparing a wedding feast to the kingdom of heaven. And sometimes parables, they have a little bit of confusing elements, but he's making it so clear. The king is the father, the son is the son, and the guests are his children, his people. And what I hope you'll come to see is that this parable is really about the story of the hard hearts of Israel. How because of their hardness of heart, God extended, he opened the doors of the feast, opened the doors of the kingdom to people like you and me, Gentiles. In verse 3, if you look down there, the king, he sends out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. In our societies today, weddings are one of the most or the biggest celebrations we do. If someone close to you is getting married, you're going to do everything you can to be there, right? You're going to take time off work. You're going to travel across the world, get a hotel, spend money on food, just to experience that one moment with them. You would never miss it. In Jewish times now, this is just no different. It's even more so, really. Jewish weddings, they're one of the most joyous occasions. And often they're lasting up to even a week. To not go to something like this, to ignore it is one thing, but for these people to just completely ignore an invite from a king for his son's wedding should be shocking to us. An invite like this would have been highly sought after. People would have fought to get invited to a wedding like this. To not even sit next to the king or near him, but just to catch a glimpse of his presence, to experience him. Let this be shocking and jarring to you that the good gifts of the king are being so easily and readily rejected. Don't move past that too quickly. Verse 4, it tells us again that the king sends out his servants. He's asking once again. This time, he's describing the feast. He's trying to change their minds. He's saying, see, the dinner is ready. My prized animals have been slaughtered. He's urging them to come. He's pleading with them. Just put yourselves there for a moment. You're planning a wedding. You find a venue. You get a photographer, flowers, food, the whole deal. Even do a dress rehearsal the night before. You get there morning of, you walk in, and no one's there. No one wants to come. What's the first thing you're going to do? What are the first thoughts? Is it thoughts of humility or thoughts of pride? Would the first thing you do be go to beg and plead with those people to come to your wedding? And what I really think this shows us, what this passage should shape, it's our very idea of the humility of Christ. If you remember Philippians 2, Paul, he talks about that the humility of Jesus is seen when he didn't count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself. taking the form of a servant. He became man. It's the humility of Christ that he would veil his glory and become man. But these past couple of weeks, reading this passage, I'm understanding more that his humility is that he would even come at all. We're the creation, and he's the creator. We should be going to him. But over and over throughout the Bible, God, he comes to us. In the garden, in the burning bush, on Mount Sinai with the Ten Commandments, in the Spirit's filling of the temple, in the incarnation, in the Spirit's filling of the church. Over and over again, we find that we have never pursued God, but that he has always pursued us. We've forsaken him countless times, but he's never forsaken us. This kind of humility is just shocking to me. And here in our parable, they invite a guest. What do they do with this humility? They ignore it. They paid no attention. They go off to their farms, to their businesses, to their lives. And others went to the point of even seizing the servants, treating them shamefully, and killing them. And I know that was just a ton of context and explanation to get to our first point, but here it is, the first response to the king's invitation. It's the indifferent. The indifferent. Going back to Jewish culture of that day, it was normal for people to be invited to these great big events without a set time. They would agree to go, but they wouldn't know exactly what day or what time the actual event would be taking place. And when that day did come, the host, he'd send out messengers to say, it's ready. The food's been prepared. The calves have been slaughtered. Decorations are up. Let the feast begin. So what that means is the guests here, the indifferent in our story, had already agreed to go. They said yes. But when the time finally came, they bailed. They had better things to do. More important things to do. They were too busy. Too busy to experience the celebration and presence of the King and his Son. One of the greatest threats to the modern church is not our disagreements about worship styles or songs. It's not our debates on liturgies or order of services. It's really not even our denominational differences. No, one of the greatest threats to the modern church is our busyness and our indifference to the gospel. I've been convicted about this, even just moving to Arizona this past few months. Right? I felt the change of pace, this new job, a new church, new relationships. All these things, although good on their own, they began to almost suffocate my relationship with Christ, to almost come around it and choke it. I have to constantly rethink, reprioritize, reorient, because so often our lives are filled with things, with calendar events, kids' practices after school, extra hours at work, constant social media, endless projects in the home, shows, movies, busy friend groups. Calendars so full that even just looking at them gives you anxiety. We need to slow down. Paul, in his first letter to the Corinthians, he says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. And what makes this so hard is that oftentimes these things are good things. But isn't that what an idol is when good things become ultimate things? Have we just attached the invitation of Jesus to a part of our lives? An ever-present calendar event that one day we may finally have time for. It's always on your calendar. You're always trying to get to it, but you'll always get to it tomorrow. Look at your week, what you're involved in, who you're busy with, what you're busy with. What does it say about what's most important in your life? J.D. Greear, the pastor of Summit Church in North Carolina, he puts this just remarkably. It's a bit of a long quote, so just try to follow me. It won't be up on the screen, so just try to follow along. He says, "It's a great irony of the Christian life that some of the most faithful to the doctrine and fervent in the mission have hearts that are cold and far from Jesus." In fact, in what might be the greatest irony of all, often it's our confidence in and our fixation on our correct doctrine and our practice and our busyness for Jesus that keeps us from fellowship with Jesus, because we substitute faithful works for him and right beliefs in him for fellowship with him. Hear that last line, because we substitute faithful works for him and right beliefs in him for fellowship with him. Have you considered that you can be busy with the things of God? That you can be so busy with serving at your local church, being part of these local ministries, planning, leading events. You can spend the most time studying theology and be more versed than anyone in your church. You can even be a missionary. You can leave your family, your careers, your lives to go to another country for years, but still have a heart that is far and cold towards Jesus. You can live a life working for the gospel while never really trusting in it for yourself. You can live a life working for the gospel and never really trust in it yourself, because that's who you did it for, yourself. And yeah, we see there are some who are rebellious in this parable, the ones who will go to the levels of attacking the gospel with thoughts, with words, or even actions. They will do everything they can to possibly bring down and destroy this invitation of the gospel. But I'm here to tell you that indifference and rebelliousness are two sides of the same coin. The one who sees an old lady's purse get stolen and ignores it, and the one who actually does the stealing, both commit egregious and horrible evils. Don't trade a relationship with God with busyness for God. Verse 7, if you look there, it's one of the hardest parts of this parable. The king was angry, and he sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burnt their city. In church, the king is gracious. The king is patient, but he will not relent forever. He will punish the wicked. He will punish the ones who have countlessly rejected his free invitation. And really what this is it's Israel's open rejection of Jesus as Christ. And this points to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, but more importantly, it points to when Jesus comes back in all power and glory, delivering eternal justice to the entire world. Are you ready for that? Verse 8. Then he said to his servants, "The wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy." And the king says, "Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find." And those servants went out into the roads and gathered all whom they found, both bad and good. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. And here in these verses, we see the second group, the second response to this invitation. We saw the indifferent first, and now we see the unworthy. This king is determined not to have an empty hall. His first and second invites were so dramatically rejected. They disrespected the king every way they knew how. So now this third invite is more broad. It's sent not just to the high status people, the elite, maybe the king's friends or his family. It's sent to all those who can hear. The Greek for the phrase main roads in these verses, it refers to the exits, the outlets, the public roads, the intersections, the city gates, the places where people commonly pass by. The common folk. The people who had no right to be invited to a feast like this. And the powerful, royal king invites them all into his presence. So to the beggar on the street, he says, come. To the tax collector overcharging his people, he says, come. To the religious elite, to the prostitute, both of them, he says, come into my feast. And what is this if not grace? God doing to us what we don't deserve. Yeah, the people who rejected the first and second invite, they weren't worthy, but neither were the people on the main road. They were the good and the bad. And take a moment just to look inwardly at your life, and what you're going to find is that you're the person on that main road. We're the commoners. We're the ones who hold no standing, who deserve nothing, who have no right to be invited into a feast of a king, but that's the heart of the Father to you. From Genesis to Revelation, from Revelation to the return of Jesus that we're waiting for, he has sent his prophets, his apostles, his Christians to invite you into that feast. His very Son came to this earth to become a man, to live his perfect life, be crucified on a cross, be rejected from the presence of the Father, so now we can be welcomed into his. It's only by the good news of Jesus that the people on the main road could ever be invited into that feast. Dane Ortlund, he wrote this book called Gentle and Lowly. And it's just an amazing, amazing book. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. But in this book, he's talking about the heart of Christ for hurting and suffering sinners, and how in the only place in the entire Bible when Jesus almost opens up his heart and just gives us a look into his character. He doesn't describe himself as all powerful and demanding. He doesn't even say joyful and generous. No, in the one place Jesus reveals his heart to us, he says he's gentle and lowly. That's the heart of your Savior. Gentle and lowly, tender, welcoming and understanding. Dane Ortlund, he goes on to say right in the first chapter, all that's true, but that's not how we normally think of Jesus. He says we project onto Jesus our skewed instincts about how this world works. Human nature, it dictates sinfully that the wealthier a person, the more they tend to look down on the poor. The more beautiful the person, the more they look down or want to be away with the ugly. And without realizing, we've taken this image and we've placed it on Jesus, that one so highly respected and mighty, that one so beautiful, would want nothing to do with us in our dirtiness and our lostness. Ortlund kind of says we think, yeah, sure, Jesus comes close to us. We agree with that, but it's almost like he holds his nose. Let me read this quote directly from the book. He says, this high and holy Christ does not cringe at reaching out and touching dirty sinners and numbed sufferers. Such embrace is precisely what he loves to do. He cannot bear to hold back. Ortlund ends the quote with his idea that we naturally think of Jesus touching us the way a little boy reaches out to touch a slug for the very first time. Hand snatching away, face all screwed up, filled with disgust. But really, when you experience the heart of Jesus, you realize that when he sees our sin, our dirtiness, our lostness on that main road, he doesn't snatch his hand away. He actually draws in closer. Our sin blocked us from the Father, and Jesus has taken that on himself. He's given us access and communion with God. So now to the one who feels like they've done too much wrong in their lives, he says, come. The one suffering from depression or anxiety, he says, come. The one with rebellious children, the one stuck in addictions, he says, come into my feast. The one who says, but Lord, you don't understand. Look at all the wrongs. Look at all the sins I've done. He says, come. But Lord, this past week, this month, I've just had no time for you. I've been so distracted. He says, come. Your Father in heaven who loves you so much, he sent his only Son to die for you, says, come, enter my feast, be in my presence. Celebrate with me. And what I hope you're beginning to see is that there's no difference between this main road people and the indifferent people. They're all lost. They're all poor. They're all unworthy. The only difference is that one group knows they are and the other doesn't. It's like the homeless man seeing a hotel sign that says free food and overnight stay, but walks right by it because he's too busy. Do you know that you're lost without Jesus? Do you know that you're poor without him? Are you constantly being struck by the fact that you're unworthy to be invited to this feast, but Jesus comes to you anyway, with a gentle and a lowly heart, gathering you up and bringing you into his presence? There's one last response to this feast invitation. We saw the indifferent, we saw the unworthy, and now finally we're going to look at the unchanged. Look with me at verses 11 to 14. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there a man who had no wedding garment. And he said to him, friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. And the king said to the attendants, bind him hand and foot and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. This last section can prove challenging for us. There's some pretty confusing elements here. And even through this week, I was struggling a little bit to understand this last character, who he was. Why wasn't he wearing a wedding garment? Why was that enough for him to be cast into what Jesus clearly describes as hell? Right? Because we're certainly led and intended to assume that the bad and the good from the previous verses were brought in as they were, which makes it more confusing on why this man was cast out for not being dressed properly. And even to this day, there's still some debate here and there about who this man was and what this wedding garment actually represents. But we're going to unpack this, and the first thing, again, we have to look is context. So first, in this time, it was generally tradition for the host of a very grand and high-end, high-status, wealthy wedding to provide the garments for the guests. So people listening to Jesus in this parable would have assumed that same thing. And again, they would have been shocked that this man simply refused to wear the garment. Now, what does that refusal mean? More context. Remember, this parable is a third of three, all set in the same location, in the same day, to the same people. And our main idea that the good news of Jesus is for all those who know themselves to be unworthy, you can ignore it. And here's the key, you can't earn it. When we put all these things together, when we see the messages of the three parables, the Pharisees and the people who were around Jesus, we realize that the man refusing to wear the wedding garment is an example of the inadequacy of self-righteousness. It's almost like he says, yeah, I'll come, I'm invited, but I'll come how I want. The refusal to wear this wedding garment, the insistence on remaining unchanged, is the idea that you can work for something that's already been earned for you. That God would somehow accept your own goodness, even though it's mixed with all this other sin in your life. And it's like Spurgeon said, talking about this man, he came because he was invited, but he came only in appearance. The banquet was intended to honor the king's son, but this man meant nothing of the kind. He was willing to eat the good things set before him, but in his heart there was no love either for the king or his well-beloved son. And you see, this is what the Pharisees did over and over again. They washed the outside of the cup while the inside was dirty. They woke up every morning, didn't thinking they needed anyone to save them, because every single day they were trying to save themselves. They took the message of Jesus, come as you are, to mean come on your own. Most other sins are visible, they're open. You can see them in public, but not self-righteousness. You can keep it hidden, quiet. You can tuck it away in these deep, dark parts of your life that no one else, not even you, know it's there. And it's like Paul Tripp, he says this, for most of us, our problem is not that we take sin too seriously, feel its weight too much, or confess our wrongs too quickly and too often. No, for most of us, our problem is that we often fail to see the seriousness of our sin and the gravity of its vertical and horizontal consequences. It's scary that we're able to call ourselves followers of Jesus Christ and yet minimize the very thing that led him to the cross. Romans 3:11, none is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. 9 verses later, Paul says, for by the works of the law, no human being will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin. So to the non-Christian, to the Christian, are you trusting in yourself? Are you simply outwardly obeying the commands of God while inwardly just nothing is there? Are you more aware of other people's sins than your own? Do you focus on their mistakes more than you do your own? Are you satisfied, content, and just happy and confident in your forgiveness without ever really confessing anything? Are you trying to earn something that's already been earned for you? The cross isn't a ladder we have to climb and work our way up. Instead, it's where the creator of the universe worked his way down to you. And you see, from the very beginning, God has provided a covering for sin. And from the very beginning, man has rejected it and tried to cover themselves. Genesis 3, right after the fall, sin entering the world, the first thing Adam and Eve did was sew fig leaves to cover themselves, because they knew they were naked and they were ashamed. But literally in the next verse, when God entered the garden, they hid. And it says later, because they were naked and they were ashamed and afraid. The garments they had to cover themselves, the ones they made for themselves, was not enough. So instead, God, in his mercy, takes away their scrappy clothes and replaces them with ones made from the first animal sacrifice, because the sacrifice needed to be made so he could cover them. And we jump all the way to the book of Revelation, chapter 7, and we see those in heaven once again are clothed in white robes. And we learn that the whiteness of the robes was because they were washed by the blood of the Lamb. The Bible you have, it's book-ended by these stories of God providing a covering for man. And at the center of that story, we see why and we see how, because Jesus left his place in heaven, lived the perfect life, and provided the perfect sacrifice for us. He was crucified on the cross. He suffered under the weight of your sin, paying for it in full, so now that the Father can cover you in those white robes. The same King from our story has invited you to the wedding feast. The Son is the groom. The bride is his church, and you are invited. Not simply as a guest, not as a last-minute invite sitting at table 24 next to the bathrooms, but as family, sitting at the head table with the Father, his Son, and his children. The invites are out. At this very moment, this feast is being prepared, and any day now, the King of heaven will return to gather his guests. How will you respond? With indifference, with self-righteousness, as one refusing to change, or as one eternally grateful, knowing they are anything but worthy. Your Savior is gentle, he's lowly, he's kind, his arms are open, waiting to welcome you in. What will you say? Let me pray.